This is another episode in the Mac interviews with Mindful Runner. Today on the podcast, I'm joined by John Carter. He's no stranger to ultra distance and he's done a lot of racing himself, and he'll explain a bit more about that as we progress. But John's also been heavily involved behind the scenes on the Mac. So that gives him an interesting perspective as well. John Carter, welcome. Good to have you here.
Thank you. Thanks, Fred. And thanks for the opportunity to have a chat.
Lovely, man. So tell me a bit about your running background. Not just your running background, but you have an ultra background, right? What distances have you run? What kind of races have you been doing?
Historically, I've not really been a distance runner. At school, I used to do short distances, 100, 200 relay. After school, really anything on wheels. We used to race bikes and road racing, etc. And I think it was about 2016, 2017, started doing park runs. We had kids shortly before then, so any activity was rather hard at the time. So I started doing park runs, and then later in the year, I think it was probably 2017, a friend of mine offered me an entry to that Volkberg trail run in Hennitzberg. And I had no idea what trail running is, but it sounded pretty cool. It was off-road, and I thought, well, let's go for the weekend. I didn't know it's a stage race, and I didn't know how far it's going to be. And expecting it's probably going to be gravel roads. So we entered this, and we started climbing up to the Iron Crown. And I think the first climb, you get the false crown. And then there's this technical bit going to the Iron Crown. And I remember running that bit and thinking, this is pretty cool. And I really started, that was my intro to trail running, and I really enjoyed it since. And from there, considering how much fun I had at that race, I figured the next obvious step would be Skyrun. So I entered that the next year, totally unprepared and absolute failure. I ended up in the medic tent with 2 IVs, having lost 9 kilos at Baloch.
Oh, wow.
Well, entries opened the week after, and I think I was probably one of the first entries for the next year. Had to go back, really had fun, and went back, finished it, and done a few since. Then got into some adventure racing. Similar story, a friend of mine said, there's this event in Swaziland, adventure racing. I had no idea what the sport is. Sounded pretty fun. Thought we'd probably end in 10 hours, and we just made 24. So that was pretty cool. Yeah. And so since it's been really focused on running. Most recently, last 2 years not. We were training for one of the big adventure races when I actually tore the ligaments in my ankle, both ligaments. That was 4 years ago, and that was actually how I got started with crewing for Mac. Is I couldn't participate in the race, and I thought, that's the next best thing. Is let's see how we can volunteer.
And that brings us to a really good point. So you've crewed at Mac. What have you learned from watching things from behind the scenes that has helped you prepare now?
To prepare for now, I think I'm familiar with the route. I've been on the route at different times all over. So I know what the aid stations are. I know the route. I know what to expect at the aid stations. It's helping me to prep on what to expect at each of the aid stations. Yeah, I think that's really what crewing there has helped me in terms of prepping for this race. And something I've noticed, perhaps it's advice also some people could take on this, is being prepared for the aid stations. I think initially or early in the race, it's easy. You can sort yourself out at the aid station. But those on day 2, 3 in the morning, you're probably going to forget something. So what I tend to do is, and what I've learned and what I've seen is that pre-pack all your gear in your drop bag for the next leg. Say it's first drop bags at Mac, and you're going to come back to Mac. So what I'd have a sealed bag with with my first legs, nutrition, etc. in at that aid station, take it out and just pop in the next leg's kit or nutrition, etc. Also pre-packed in or per leg. So I try to prep in terms of time, and then actually mark each Ziploc bag that this is leg 5 or leg 6. And I think that if you can prep that, it makes your time at the aid station a lot more efficient. And you can actually focus on shoes and actually eating something and not worrying about where's my batteries, where's this nutrition, etc. So I think that's a takeaway of what I've seen during the race.
Yeah, that's great advice. Was there a specific moment at which you realized, okay, you're definitely coming in to do this 200? Can you remember anything?
I think I actually know the seed was planted in 2021. I did the 100 miler that year, and it was the first year that they introduced the 200. If I remember, yeah, I think it was 2021 was the first year with the 200. I was doing the 100, and I met up with Guy McKenzie somewhere before Mac Hut in the evening, and so he was on his in loop, however far that was at that stage, and we stopped at Mac Hut, and I remember him taking his shoes off, and I just saw blisters, and thinking to myself, that's pretty hard. And then we spent a lot of time. We went through Mac pools, and I think we went all the way to about Stables Hut. We spent a lot of time together, and during that race, I remember thinking, you know what? Every step I take, he's taken two, and that's pretty cool. And I think that's when the seed was planted. And it's obviously germinated over the years being at the race. And I think my decision was made last year. And the final call was actually made after last year's Mac. Myself, Yelof, and Fricky were having a beer at the finish. And sort of jokingly said, so, you know, is he seeing me at the start next year? It was sort of sealed with a fist bump right there. So a long time coming.
A lot of people got into trouble with Yelof and Fricky and a beer.
Yeah, so no, I'm glad they've been hinting toward that over the last few years. Finally, also my work has changed a little. I put a few structures in place during the course of last year. It just was not possible to do it before this year. So, yeah, this year it's actually possible to train for this.
That's quite a difficult thing. When you've got a job, and as I understand it, your job moves you around the country quite a bit. When you've got a job like that, to fit all your training in, how do you manage that? How do you make sure you get as much of the training in, or do you just focus on trying to get the effective training in? How do you distinguish that?
I've really tried to stick to this program. It's been hard, but I made the commitment to really put myself in as good a position physically as I can be for this race. So what I'd do when I know I'm going to travel, I've got sort of weeks training planned, and I'd tend to book at hotels where they've got a gym. So I just got back from Lusaka today, and last night was at the hotel next door on a treadmill quick. So a lot of training was done on a treadmill. A lot of training was done at night. I think my neighbors think, this guy's rather silly, and with his headlamp heading out at 10:30 in the evening and returning an hour and a half later. So I've really tried to fit it in as well as I can, or been able to, but there are some sessions that you just aren't able to do. But it's taken a lot of planning and also a lot of sacrifice from one's family. You plan weekends away around your training. I'm sure I think everyone training for these events are in a similar position. It's quite a commitment to try and balance these things.
Yeah, and that's certainly a thing that isn't evident when you're out there running and people see the photos and you talk the war stories afterwards, is the amount of sacrifice that your family has made, that you've made in other areas of your life, because you're training between 10 and 18 hours a week, depending on the stage of training you're at. So It does suck up a lot of time.
It really does.
How does it feel preparing for a race that you've seen unfold from the outside? Yes, you've done the 100, and so you know the route, but it's that second 100 that's the fascinating part, right? What does it feel like? You've seen those guys do that now. And you spoke about Guy. My Damascus moment for that 200 was meeting Nicholas Mulder. As I was going up towards Morganson, Nicholas was running down towards me, and he was almost 200 Ks in, and he was running towards me, and it just blew me away. Now, this guy he was 200 Ks into his race, and he was running down the hill towards me, and it just blew my mind, and that was it. I think that was my point at which I went, okay, I've got to try and do. But for you, how does it feel?
Sure. I'm going to be honest. It's bittersweet. I've really, really grown to enjoy being on that side of the race, supporting. And I mean, if I could give advice to anyone, if you're not able to participate in these races, put up your hand and volunteer. It is just so rewarding being out there and seeing and being inspired by what you see out there, and the guys guys and girls going through hard time. It's really rewarding. So it's bittersweet. When I spoke with Yelof to enter this year, it was based on the condition that next year I'm back on that crew. I'm glad to be on this side of the start line for this year. It's a privilege. And I'm going to enjoy it. But I'm still on the WhatsApp group of the organizers. So I'm still, at least in the loop on that.
It is. It's always rewarding, and I agree with you. If you want to be involved in trail racing for a long time, then get involved. Sweep, man aid stations, whatever. It's just great fun being out there and participating, even in the background where you're not forefront in racing.
Absolutely.
200 miles it's much longer than 100 miles, right? And this particular race, this is the toughest foot race in South Africa, possibly in Africa. It's a long way, we all talk about 200 miles, and I think it's because if you say 320 kilometers, it balloons in your head, right? So 200 miles is a little more compact.
Yeah.
In terms of preparing for it, is your training very different between a 200 and 100-mile preparation?
Yes. Well, it's definitely been. I realized that this is far longer than I've raced before, or in terms of a single discipline race. Adventure racing was further, a different sport. The biggest change I've made is, for the first time since school, I got a coach. I approached Marius from Lensburg end of last year, so I think September, after my entry was in, and asked him, Marius, what advice do you have? And honestly, not knowing he's part of your guys' coaching team, he said, you know what, he's a coach. And we had the chat, yourself, me and Marius, and I'm very grateful we did. It allowed structure in a training program for me, where I didn't have to try and figure out a training program. It was provided. It made it easy for me to plan a week of training. And also, I tend to train alone just because of my schedule. Another benefit which I found in that is there's someone to keep you honest. There's someone in the background going through a lot of trouble, setting up these training programs. And for me, there's that mutual commitment. You've got a coach training you, but you've got that commitment to the coach. And I think that was, and it's definitely been the biggest change. In terms of volume of training, it's definitely been more perhaps than previous, but it's been very structured and surprising, not much longer necessarily than what you train perhaps for a 100-miler. I'm of the opinion you can only train to run that far. Thereafter, you just need to continue. I think 100 miles, 200 miles, time on the legs. And I think that perhaps comes with a bit of experience, but that would be the biggest change in terms of my training.
Coach keeps that accountability going. And also, something I often say to people, there are two people in the whole world who care about every single run you do, and that's you and your coach. That's the person that you can speak to, no matter how good or bad a run went. That's the person who will talk to you about it.
For sure.
I know, and if you look at the people who have succeeded at the initial MacMacs, the 200 milers, it's adventure races, right? Because you bring that multi-day experience into trail running. To be honest, with a 100 miler, maybe you're awake for one night, so it's not multiple nights out there. But when you get to a 200, you are out there for 3 nights. And it's only the adventure racing experience that gives you that knowledge. How has that influenced your approach to the race, strategic?
Me and Morris were actually chatting about that just now, sleep strategies, etc. And what I've learned, I think, from not only adventure racing, but really just doing adventures, missions, FKTs, just adventure sports in general, is that there's a plan and there's an outline, which I've got set out for myself. But I know that that's the extent of it. It's a plan, and it's going to change. And I'm not only prepared for that, I'm expecting that. That things change, the weather changes, you feel ill perhaps in a portion of the race, but also on this distance, you've got enough time that should something go wrong, should you feel ill, you actually have the time to recover. You've got 2 or 3 hours where you can take it really slow and recover from that state and actually just carry on. And also regarding sleep, I'm not planning where I'm going to sleep. I think you create expectation for oneself. I tend to look at micro napping under a tree. I don't want to get too comfortable. Well, personally, I find it hard to then get up and get out again. So I try to really just stick it out when you need to sleep. have a 5 or 10 minute micro nap and just carry on.
That does make sense. And it's interesting, the sleep strategies between races at this kind of distance is fascinating. They're the micro nappers, they're the long sleeps, there's the planned, the unplanned. Yeah. And everyone's got slightly different variations, and nobody's come up with a winning formula yet that I can see. Who's your support crew? Have you got support crew out there? And how are they going to work?
So my race plan is I'm self-sufficient during the race. The first part of the race is self-supported anyway. There's only so many places where you can be assisted by a crew. But this year, my parents are coming up. I've invited them to come join us for the event. They'll be part of the support crew, captained by my eldest daughter. You guys might remember her last year. She spent the whole weekend at MacMac with me at all the aid stations. So she's team captain, at least for the first half. And then she goes on a camp on Saturday. So thereafter, I've got my parents, my wife, etc. up there as a support crew, really for moral support and to be at the aid stations which they are able to be at. But in terms of race support, that's really self-sufficient. I don't want to rely on someone being there and things go wrong. I mean, you could have a vehicle breakdown and your crew's not there. So for that reason, I want to be self-supported. But yeah, I'm fortunate to have a crew supporting me.
I think you're right on that, on not setting an expectation. I've seen it with drop bags especially. People will turn up at where the drop bag should be and their drop bag's not there for whatever reason. And then the wheels come off. And if you're mentally prepared for that, going, I'm always got to be self-sufficient, then you're just getting a bonus when you do get assistance.
Yes, absolutely.
You've seen other people out there breaking down, breaking through. We're all going to go through the mental highs, the mental lows. You got a coping strategy in place. How are you going to handle those things?
Well, I think I've got a few things. First, highs and the lows. I tend to pray a lot on route. So, not that you expect suddenly you're going to feel like $1 million, but it's good to know you're not alone. I think that's my first coping strategies is that. And then a few tangible things. My daughters are rather artistic. So this year I've given them opportunity to each decorate one of my trekking poles each. So they've taken that and decorated it and written a small note on the back of that. So that's something tangible where it's really going hard. You can look down at that and see this, and that sort of lifts you. And another thing, I think there's the mental aspect, and then there's these tangible things. I always race with my wedding ring, just rolling that every now and then, remembering my wife's actually thinking of me, supported me to be able to do these things. So thinking of those privileges which one has really gets you through. And then just grit. It's going to be hard. We know this in advance, and just don't quit. I mean, you just need to keep moving.
Curiosity is a word that's often bounced around in our community, and you need that sense of curiosity about, can I do this? What's that going to feel like? Have you got any particular point in the race that you are most curious about your ability to deal with?
Regarding my ability, I think the total distance is new to me. I am confident that I have it in me to finish the distance. I think the time is probably something I would be more curious about. How fast can I do this? It's a challenge, I think, pace-wise. So I suppose the curiosity is really just how far can you go and how quick can you do that?
What lessons do you hope to draw from this race?
I've been thinking about that a lot today, traveling. I can't really put my finger on what I would like to get out of it. And maybe in 3 weeks from now, I'll send you a message and say, that's what I found. Maybe I find it out on the trail. Yeah, I think with these events and these very long distances, you'll probably not, or I find I don't necessarily learn something during the event because it's hard. You just, it's cold, you're hungry, you're tired. But after the event, when you really retrospect about those moments, there's always those moments that occur in the race. And I think that's when you actually find the value, is when you've actually got a chance to digest the whole process that you've been through. And and then take those little life lessons and apply them. I think what I've found in the past is when things are hard, You can, recall the really hard times, physically hard times, and just remind yourself that it's not that bad. Things could be harder, and there are people who have it way harder than we do. Yeah, I think that's a takeaway for me.
Yeah. Yeah, there's the stoic way, right? When you are out there and it's cold, well, it could be raining,
Could
is
be
the
snowing
mindset.
this
Yeah.
year.
And if it's raining, well, it could be snowing. And if it's snowing, well, it could be sleeting. There's always something worse that it could be. And that's one of those little mindset tricks that just goes, it's not as bad as it could be. So we keep on.
I tend to enjoy those very hard conditions. Because of that, it's there's something special being out there in super hard conditions. That those are the ones you remember. The good races are cool and they're good in the moment, but the ones you remember are those very, very hard ones, the tough moments where you really had to grind through something, and that tends to stick, doesn't it?
Yeah. Well, the question is, do you want a race that you didn't learn anything from? Because that's probably the perfect race, because you knew everything and you executed perfectly. Or do you want to come away from a race having learned crap?
Yes, absolutely. I think, these things, it always makes for a good story.
Yeah. Yeah, the stories are part of the reason we do it, right?
That's lekker.
Yeah. So do you feel like this race is like a logical growth of your running, or is it something more, or is this just you're going to do 1-200 and then you're done?
I think my approach to the sports has really been, I enter for something really big and then train for it. So in terms of a progressive growth towards this, no, I don't think it's been since, as I said, 2021. It's been in my mind, I really want to do this. And that's really the reason for doing that. I've been trying to think about, one does this, is this a personal thing? And it probably is. And I've not been able to answer that, whether or not, what's the reason in doing this? Because I don't know. People have been asking me, why do you want to run this distance? And I've not got an answer to that. And I think the only conclusion I've come up with is something in me needs to do this. I need to do this race for something unexplainable. And hopefully, maybe I find it in the mountains in 3 weeks, what that reason is. Maybe at a next give you a better answer.
Look, I honestly think, and that you must have a why thing has always bothered me, because I can't articulate why. And very often the answer is the same as a mountaineer's answer. Why climb that mountain? Because it's there. Because I'm curious about what's on the other side of it. And I think, although ultra running isn't a big mountain, there is something, I want to see what's on the other side of this. I'm sure you're very similar. I think most of us who are outdoor people. You kind of go around a corner and there's a new view, but there's another corner. And I want to go and see what's around that bend and then around that bend. And it's just an extension of that curiosity of what's around the next corner.
It really is. And we found it so often. We often joke about if we go out for a trail run, how long is it going to be? It could be 2 or 8 hours. One doesn't know. There might just be something cool.
That's the beauty of it. And that's the beauty of being fit and healthy enough to say it doesn't matter whether it's 2 or 8 hours. I'm just going to satisfy the curiosity.
Absolutely.
You've got daughters. You've got a community around you. Any thoughts on legacy and personal growth and what doing this event might mean to the people around you?
I'd like to think that it's an example for my daughters. I think firstly for them to show them that nothing comes easy. They've really been supporting me every evening. They've been asking me, so Dad, how long are you going to go run today? So they've really been involved in this and involved through the whole process. I think it's important if there's something I'd like them to learn from it is to not give up. If you've got a goal, go and work hard at it. It's not going to come easy. You need to work hard at it. Don't give up. And during the event, it's going to be hard. But that difficulty is temporary. It will pass. 1-2 days later, it's over and you're comfortable again. If there's something I'd like them to learn is that you need to work hard at something and the reward is really, really personal.
Fantastic. John Carter, thanks. You've given us both sides of the story. I think it's got to be a little tougher entering a race like this when you know what the picture looks like because you've been through all of the aid stations, watching 200-mile runners going. And it takes a lot of courage to then show up in a different way, right, with your shoes on your feet and your turn to do it. So I'm really psyched to see how you go. It's going to be fun sharing some time out there with you.
Awesome. Thanks, Fred. No, I'm really looking forward to it. I'm really actually really looking forward to this race. I think it's different to previous races. I've looked forward to these things, and this one's special. I can't explain why. There's something really special which I'm looking forward to, and spending time with all you guys out there. It's going to be